What happens when one of Northeast Florida's most recognizable entertainment landmarks suddenly becomes one of the region's most talked about redevelopment opportunities? That's the question now surrounding the sale of the longtime adventure landing property in St. Augustine, a property that for decades served as a familiar part of the area's entertainment identity. Whether people grew up visiting the arcade, playing mini golf, racing go-karts, or spending summer afternoons at the water attractions, adventure landing became one of those places almost everyone in Northeast Florida recognized. It occupied a unique position because it appealed to both locals and tourists at the same time, something not every entertainment venue successfully accomplishes. But now, in 2026, the property has officially changed hands in a deal reportedly valued at roughly $3.6 million. And that sale immediately changes the conversation from nostalgia to long-term development potential. Because in rapidly growing markets like St. Augustine and St. Johns County, transactions involving highly visible commercial land are rarely just simple real estate sales. They are signals. Signals about land value, future growth corridors, investor confidence, and how quickly an area is evolving economically. Adventure landing sits in a highly strategic location near one of the fastest growing regions in Northeast Florida. Over the past several years, St. Johns County has experienced explosive residential growth driven by relocation demand, expanding master planned communities, and broader migration into the Jacksonville metro area. As more people move into the region, commercially positioned land with visibility, infrastructure access, and large acreage becomes increasingly scarce and increasingly valuable. That scarcity changes the economics of older properties dramatically. Land that may have once primarily supported entertainment or tourism operations suddenly becomes attractive for retail development, hospitality projects, mixed-use environments, or residential expansion. That is exactly what makes the adventure landing sale so important. The value attached to the transaction is not just connected to the existing business operation. It is tied to what the property could potentially become over the next decade. In high-growth markets, older entertainment properties often find themselves under increasing redevelopment pressure as surrounding land values rise. Retail corridors expand, housing demand accelerates, infrastructure improves, and eventually, the land itself becomes more valuable than the original use occupying it. Even without finalized redevelopment plans, publicly confirmed, the sale itself tells a larger story about where St. Augustine is heading. Prime land in major growth corridors is becoming increasingly competitive. Developers and investors are aggressively positioning themselves ahead of future expansion, searching for large sites capable of supporting long-term projects. Parcels with strong visibility, existing road access, and surrounding population growth are becoming harder to acquire, which naturally pushes values upward. Adventure landing reflects that broader market reality. At the same time, this story carries a strong emotional layer that goes far beyond real estate economics. Entertainment destinations like adventure landing create nostalgia. Generations of families built memories there. For many residents, the property represents childhood experiences, summer traditions, and community familiarity. So whenever a landmark property changes ownership in a rapidly growing region, there's often tension between redevelopment and preservation. People begin asking whether another piece of local identity is about to disappear in exchange for new construction. That tension is becoming increasingly common throughout Northeast Florida as growth accelerates. Areas that once sat on the edges of development are now surrounded by expanding residential communities, rising traffic counts, and increasing commercial demand. The economics shift, land values rise, and eventually redevelopment conversations become unavoidable. This is a pattern seen in many fast-growing cities across the country, and St. Augustine is increasingly experiencing that same evolution. What makes the adventure landing property particularly interesting is its location at the intersection of tourism and residential expansion. St. Augustine continues attracting millions of visitors due to its historic district, beaches, and coastal identity, but it is also becoming more residential every year as new full-time residents relocate into the area. That creates competing pressures for land use. Tourism-oriented attractions contribute to entertainment infrastructure and visitor activity, while residential and mixed-use development often generate stronger long-term returns for property owners and investors. Balancing those competing interests becomes one of the defining challenges for rapidly growing communities. From a commercial real estate perspective, sales like this can also influence surrounding property values and future investment behavior. Large transactions often become benchmarks that reshape how nearby landowners and developers evaluate the market. Once a major property sells, surrounding parcels may suddenly appear more attractive for redevelopment or repositioning. That can accelerate transformation throughout an entire corridor. There is also a larger economic layer attached to the sale itself. A $3.6 million acquisition reflects confidence in the future trajectory of the region. Buyers do not deploy capital at that scale unless they believe surrounding demand, infrastructure, and population growth will continue expanding over time. Whether the eventual vision for the site includes retail, hospitality, entertainment, residential development, or some combination of multiple uses, the investment itself signals long-term belief in the St. Augustine market. That confidence is not isolated to this one project either. Across Northeast Florida, multiple sectors are expanding simultaneously. Healthcare systems are growing, master-planned communities continue adding new phases. Infrastructure projects are opening additional growth corridors. Retail investment remains active throughout the region. Adventure Landing's sale fits directly into that larger narrative of accelerating development and rising land values. Another major factor influencing the conversation is the broader evolution of entertainment itself. Traditional family entertainment centers now face increasing competition from newer, mixed-use entertainment concepts that combine dining, social gathering spaces, experiential attractions, nightlife, and event programming into integrated environments. Across the country, developers are rethinking what entertainment destinations look like in today's market. That could significantly influence the eventual future of the property. Redevelopment does not necessarily mean entertainment disappears entirely. In many modern projects, entertainment becomes part of a larger mixed-use ecosystem that includes restaurants, retail, hospitality, and residential elements. Experience-driven development has become one of the strongest trends in commercial real estate because consumers increasingly seek destinations where they can spend extended periods of time doing multiple activities in one location. St. Augustine's continued population growth and tourism strength make that type of development increasingly viable. Of course, many unanswered questions still remain surrounding the property. Will the current entertainment operation continue in some form? Will the site ultimately be redeveloped entirely? Will family entertainment remain part of the long-term vision? At this stage, much of that remains uncertain, but what is already clear is that the property's future now carries much larger implications than it did before the sale occurred. Properties like this often become catalysts for broader change. Once a major site changes ownership, surrounding investment activity frequently accelerates. Developers begin evaluating nearby parcels. Businesses reconsider future positioning. Infrastructure planning shifts to accommodate anticipated growth. Over time, one large transaction can help reshape an entire commercial corridor. That is why this story matters beyond nostalgia alone. It reflects the broader transformation happening throughout St. Johns County and Northeast Florida as a whole. Areas that once felt quieter, less developed, or more suburban are increasingly becoming major investment targets due to sustained population growth and rising demand. And as those changes continue, difficult conversations naturally emerge about preservation, entertainment, land use, and long-term community identity. Adventure Landing now represents all of those conversations simultaneously. For some people, it remains a beloved childhood destination tied to personal memories. For investors, it represents a highly strategic redevelopment opportunity sitting within a major growth corridor. For the city and surrounding community, it represents another chapter in the ongoing evolution of St. Augustine itself. And whatever ultimately happens to the property, this sale clearly marks a turning point. Because when long-standing regional landmarks begin changing hands in strategic growth corridors, it usually means that the surrounding market has entered an entirely new phase of growth. St. Augustine appears to be entering exactly that phase right now. I'm Luke Christmas, and it's always Christmas when you work with Christmas Homes.